Hey, hello everybody. Chris Samartage, Brotherhood of Light Show, current YouTube channel. And this week we're doing a show that was inspired by Pete Pardo. He did a show a couple weeks ago, Pete Pardo of Sea of Tranquility, about uh, his 20 albums that influenced him and influenced his life, changed his life. The 20 albums that changed my life. That's the title, for lack of other titles. And then Melody Murphy did one on the 10 shows that changed her life, inspired by Pete Pardo. And then Mazzy, which is Norman Masler, at his show, he did the 12 albums that inspired my life. So I'm going to do my show on the albums that inspired my life because I thought they were really good shows. And Norman has a similar background to me. He grew up in San Francisco. He's right around my age, maybe a little bit older. And he experienced going to Winterland and Golden Gate Park and the Fillmore and all that. And he's in the record business, at least in the commercial end of it, distributing, working at record stores. So let's get on with the title shot. So I've chosen to do the 15 albums that changed my life, and that just ended up working out because there was 15 albums that changed my life. There's some doubles in there. We'll get into that, or artists that had two albums the same year that kind of influenced me. And then Pete Pardo had two of the same albums I'm picking, and Melanie had one, and Norman had one. But they all had a lot of the same artists, but the albums were different. So there was out of their shows, four of them the same as that I picked. So we're going to get on to the next slide. Okay, here's my first album, and these are going to be more or less chronological from when I started going to see music. So this album was released on July 10th, 1964, and it's called A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles. And then on the left, this poster on the left is the movie Hard Day's Night. And back then, I didn't have a record player. My cousins had a record player, and I would go over to their house and I'd listen to these bands like the Beatles and Rolling Stones and Kinks and the Beach Boys. And now this is 1964. And my cousin, I was 10 at the time, and my cousin was 13. Her and her three girlfriends took me to see Hard Day's Night at the local movie theater, and we saw Dr. No, which was James Bond, and we saw Hard Day's Night as a double feature. And about a week or two later, I was hanging out. My dad was out partying with his buddies, and after work, so she goes, "What do you want to do?" And I go, "Well, let's go see the Beatles movie." I took my mom to the Beatles movie, and she loved it. She loved the humor. And that week, they went on sale, and she bought 2 tickets to go see the Beatles. And here's the poster on the right, the Beatles at the Cow Palace. There's the tickets, August 31st. And I went and saw the Beatles. And now I'm in the music business. I work in the music business, in the live entertainment business. And I've been to like over 3,000 concerts in a bunch of my career, and aside just as a spectator. And this was the wildest, craziest concert of any of them I've ever been to, and it's my first concert. So that's the first one, number 1. So now it's 1966, 2 years later. I've been listening to AM radio, and they play a lot of like Hermits and the Rolling Stones and the Beatles and B.J. Thomas and all this pop music. And then I also listened to that was like KYA, KFRC in San Francisco, and I listened to KDIA Lucky 13, which is soul music, because I liked a little more raw soul music as a variety. So I'm a young kid, and then all of a sudden FM music comes out. So KPFA was out of Berkeley, and they started playing like alternative and psychedelic and folk music and rock and roll and rock music at night. And then that turned into KSAN, which is Tom Donahue there. I think he was at both stations, but anyway, there's pictures of both their logos, and there's Tom Donahue. And so it's late at night, and I have my little FM radio, a transistor radio, and I put it under my pillow so my parents, don't wake them up. And I'm listening to these FM radio, and they're playing these like really long jam songs, like maybe Light My Fire or and this particular album, East West, by Paul Butterfield with Mike Bloomfield and Elvin Bishop. They played the song East West, and I heard this long modal jam, and it just was, I was sold, man. That was it. And so if you see this poster on the left, in 1966, Paul Butterfield played the Fillmore with Chad Helms, and Bill Graham was promoting the concerts. And all the bands from San Francisco came out and saw Paul Butterfield, and it was the big game changer because they ended up seeing this intense jam session that they did on the song East West, and like the Grateful Dead and Country Joe and Quicksilver was on the bill. They saw it, and Big Brother, and they all kind of went from folk into this modal rock, Country Joe and the Fish. So it really changed. It changed my life, and it changed all the music scene also. So now it's 1967, and I think for Christmas, I got this reel-to-reel player. It had speakers that folded out, and so I had this Mike Bloomfield reel-to-reel album was how I bought my music back then. That particular first year, I had this reel-to-reel, and I bought a bunch of records, but one of them I bought because I loved this band, Country Joe and the Fish. I was like, so now I'm like 12-year-old kid, and or 13, and this funky, weird sound that they come out with, I just really dug, and I really liked the light show on the cover. I was just fascinated by that cover of those 4 light show panels, which ends up being a company I ended up working with and owning all those slides and stuff. It's just really bizarre. But anyway, so Country Joe and the Fish, electric music for your mind and body. It was one of my first psychedelic albums I loved. So number 3 album, Iron Butterfly, In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida, and also bought it in one of those reel-to-reel pre-recorded tapes, and I had to have it. In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida song I loved, but I love the album cover too. I mean, it was like, I don't know if I bought it for the album cover or I bought it for the music. I certainly bought it for the music, but I certainly love the album cover. It might have influenced me why to get this album over anything else. Now, I had other records, but this is also this is now 1968, and then I've ended up working with the guy who did this light show in my now career. So it's just weird how when things that you're attracted to when you're young. Okay, now at this point, album 1968, I now get this little Gerard turntable, and these older people, like my neighbor's older sister and my cousin who lives in my same neighborhood, starts loaning me albums, and I'm recording them onto reel-to-reel. So now I've got these records, and this record, Quicksilver Messenger Service, the first album, was just introduced me to the dual guitar thing and the real psychedelic, trippy. They do a song called Gold and Silver. It's a take on Take 5. It's kind of jazz rock maybe, or psychedelic rock. The other song, The Fool, is this big long psychedelic song, and they also do Pride of Man. and the guy on the right, John Cipollina, just his guitar slinger, and they were just a dual guitar band that was like kind of, in a weird way, progressive rock, but maybe sort of psychedelic rock, but not the best vocalists, but just amazing playing, and I was just attracted to that immediately. So Quicksilver Messenger Service, first album, and then the second album also is really great, Happy Trails, and then they kind of got some other members after that, changed their sound a little bit, but these first two records are life changers. So number 5, Jeff Beck, Truth. Okay, Jeff Beck, 1968. Now this is the first really heavy rock album that really influenced me, and he's just this incredible guitar player, and Rod Stewart's the vocalist, and the lead guitarist of Rolling Stones is playing bass, and anyway, the duel between Beck's guitar and Rod Stewart's singing and the way they trade off, and actually Jimmy Page plays on this album because he was in the Yardbirds with Beck. So it's just, for me, it's one of the greatest albums of 1968, and it just, cemented me to be a lifelong Jeff Beck fan and a Rod Stewart fan, and they did another album called Beck-Ola, but this one is just amazing, and their Superstition song, it's incredible. Just the phrasing of the guitar with the vocalist, I just sold it. I love this record. You can't say enough about it. So now, released in 1969, Johnny Winter, second winner, and just Johnny Winter. The two albums were released, one in April and one in October. Okay, so the Johnny Winter, the black covered one, is it's basically a blues album, and I'm a white kid, and this guy, this albino, turns me on to the blues, and there's every kind of blues imaginable on this record, and it just totally sold me. And then when Second Winter came out, which I don't know which album I got first, that's just a blazing best Johnny Winter album ever. And this is 1969. I'm a little bit older. I'm in high school now, and it's one of those records that I played it 1,000 times. I mean, it was just Highway 61 and all the rock and roll stuff, and then he does some originals. And it's a three-sided album, and it's just to today one of my favorite albums by Johnny Winter, or just straight up rock guitarists, like Texas Southern rock guitar. Okay, so here's Live Dead, the Grateful Dead, released in November 1969. Both these records, Second Winter and this one, I played in 1970 constantly and continued to play them. And this Live Dead is not the country western Dead of American Beauty. I didn't like the first two records that much, first three records, but when they came out with this live record, there was just a lot of passion and fire, and it's kind of, for Grateful Dead, it's kind of proggy. Okay, it's jammy and proggy, and Garcia's just ripping it up. And then the Dark Star, man, I used to just put the record on and go to sleep every night listening to that album. I mean that album side. Live Dead is my favorite Grateful Dead album by far, my favorite period of the band in 1969. They were just on fire when they played live. So once again, we constantly listen to this record, this and Second Winter, in high school. Okay, here we go. Rolling Stones. And so this album, Sticky Fingers, is a perfect record. It came out in 1971, and I found this album to be just the perfect record. Now, they had like around a 10 or 12 album run from like 68 to 81 that's just incredible, and this is sort of in the middle, and it's just the best Rolling Stones album, and it's just a classic. And I went and saw them after that when they played Exile on Main Street tour after, and it's just kind of set like the reality that, you know, of this straight up rock and roll band that's still the same as they were then, they were now, and it just kind of was, you know, really helped me form my life as a guy that's been in the music business and just stick to my guns and just be a pure rocker. Okay, here we are with Deep Purple, Made in Japan. Now, this album came out in 1972, and I had been going to concerts throughout my high school. I'd gone to over 50 shows at the Fillmore Winterland, and I was introduced. I saw Black Sabbath twice. I saw Led Zeppelin. I saw a lot of The Who, the Rolling Stones, like I said before. But this guy just turned me on to Deep Purple. Says, "Oh, they're playing this week. You should go see them. They're really good if you like Led Zeppelin." So I went and saw them, and I was sitting right up front, right in front of Ritchie Blackmore, and they just literally blew my mind. They were the best concert I'd ever seen out of all those concerts I'd seen since the Beatles, and they were like just on fire, and their musicianship and their performance was just incredible. I mean, they were, you know, the guitarist was like the best lead guitarist I'd ever seen, and the singer was just mind-blowing. His vocals were just, you know, screams. And it's been like a guilty pleasure ever since. I've been a Ritchie Blackmore fan, Deep Purple fan. I saw them later on when they reformed in the 80s. And this album, Made in Japan, I saw them in June of 72, and they recorded this thing in August of 72. And it was basically the same. If you listen to this record, that was the concert I saw. It was like, and that album is just on fire. So, Deep Purple. Okay, so Caravanserai, 1972, and the first three Santana albums are incredible. I love Santana 3, which we call the Light Show cover album, and but I find this record to stand the test of time, and it's also okay. So Santana is a rock guitar player with this Latin rhythm section, you know, with timbales and congos, and a great drummer. And but he also, at this point, now this is when things are changing. He's mixing jazz, he's mixing fusion, he's mixing Miles Davis experimental jazz like Bitches Brew. And so, you know, not necessarily prog, but more like fusion or jazz rock. And so I think they went for this. They didn't go commercial, and they set the bar with this album. And so you've got the mix of the Latin rhythm, you've got the jazz new bass player, you've got the ripping guitar of Neil Schon and Carlos Santana. And the album is kind of choppy, and it has sound effects, and it's almost like I get visions when I listen to this music. It's visually, it evokes visions in my mind, and I see, like, you know, soaring through the clouds, or, you know, watching a sunset over a swamp. I mean, it's incredible. It's kind of a breakthrough record, and it's, yeah, I like it, you know, like you got these John McLaughlin and these guys that are fusion guys, and they're just playing all this incredibly intense stuff. But this album, it breathes, it lives, it's got soul, man. It's just incredible. Highly advise this one. It changed my life and kind of matured me a little bit, got me away from some of that 3-chord rock bands, and got me into jazz rock, fusion, prog, all that sort of stuff, which made it kind of hard to digest some stuff, you know, like glam rock bands of the '70s, but I did stay and hang with a lot of rock bands throughout the '70s. But this is really one of the records I just still cherished till today. Now, of course, I've saved the best for last, and 1967, Are You Experienced comes out, Jimi Hendrix, and that I had this on the reel-to-reel tape back then, and so I've gone out of phase here, but I wanted to save him, and this album has just changed everything. It just changed music. It changed my opinion about music. It just was a breakthrough artist. The guy is he's from outer space. He's just incredible. I mean, he just is one of the best musicians ever, and my absolute favorite. So I just want to mention the complete Jimi Hendrix catalog. Like I said, he's my favorite artist, and these are the 6 records that I listened to from 1967 on to now. These are the ones I like. Now there's been a bunch of re-releases and there's some great live stuff. But these are the albums that are the core Jimi Hendrix that he actually had a lot to do with. He recorded these records and released them. Well, he didn't release the last 2, but he did the recording in Electric Lady Studios on those. So I just want to mention the whole catalog. It's just Hendrix in general changed my life, and all these 6 albums are the reason why. Okay, here is The Police, 1980. And their whole catalog kind of changed, but this is my favorite record, Sada Manana. And so the guitar player, the guy on the right, came from he actually played with Jimi Hendrix back in the day, and he was a rock guitarist. And but this influence in 1980 there was punk, there was a new wave, and there was reggae and ska and rock. And so these guys took all those combinations and created this music. And it was just the ultimate crossover band. And, I wasn't really I used to go see punk bands at Mabuhay. We would go see Todd Rundgren or something at Old Waldorf. Then we'd go to Mabuhay and hang out and watch Dead Kennedys or something. So I was into punk, not a big reggae guy, but to me, this is just a perfect mix. And I saw these guys twice. I saw them at the Cow Palace. I saw them at the US Festival. And to me, they were the ultimate early 80s rock band that I just loved. And then, of course, Deep Purple came out in the mid-80s. And I had got to see Rod Stewart and Jeff Beck play together. And but they were just the ultimate sound for the time. So the Doors, the first album, I'd sort of mentioned I'd heard, listening to FM radio when I was younger, and their whole catalog was great. But in 1983, I really wasn't into the hair metal that much that was coming out. And this album came out, Alive She Cried, on the right here. It's a recording from the Fillmore East. And it was my favorite album of the year. I just loved it. And it really got me back into the Doors. And so they were one of my favorite bands in 1983 and my favorite album. Unfortunately, later on in my career, I ended up working with the Doors of the 21st Century, doing my light show, Brotherhood of Light is a light show company that does light shows with rock bands. That's what I do for a living. And I ended up touring with Ray and Robbie and Ian Asbury from the Cult. And we went all over the world touring, and we recorded this DVD, and it was released in 2004. And it was basically LA Woman Live, because they Jim had gone to France and died when they never toured with that record. So we did the whole record plus greatest hits package. So anyway, there's just the Doors certainly changed my life, and even in my later career. So it's really, really love it. I love this music and these guys, and it was a really wonderful part of my life to travel around the world with them. Okay, this is the final one. Now we're going to go back to 1972, and I was into the Allman Brothers. I had Idlewild South and Fillmore East, and I went and saw the Allman Brothers 2 weeks before Duane Allman died. But in 1972, I graduated from high school, and my buddy Matt Kiley, I remember very well, my parents threw a party directly after graduation, like it was like 7 or 8 at night. All my friends that we graduated and their parents came over my parents' house. Now my parents were super cool. They had a case of champagne. We were like drinking and partying. And Matt Kiley gave me Eat a Peach for my high school graduation. That's that great moment in your life. You don't even realize it until you finally graduate from school. And but lo and behold, in 1990, I was half owner of the Brotherhood of Light with Pete Rabinowitz, and we were doing light shows for Bill Graham, and he hooked us up, or his son and some other guys hooked us up with the Allman Brothers, and they tried us out, and we went on tour and started doing light shows with the Allman Brothers band. And I spent 25 years touring with the Allman Brothers, and which has just been incredible. And then I'm now touring with their sons, Devin Allman and Dwayne Betts, and Barry Oakley Jr. was there also for a while. So I've been touring for like 34 and a half years with the Allman Brothers and their families, and it's just been an amazing career, and it's just been fantastic. So I mean, this album means so much to me, and it's just life-changing. And this album below, Shades of Two Worlds, is an album cover that I did with the Allman Brothers band with a Liquid Light show. And so it's kind of like when I had the early Liquid Light show covers that I bought, and then I ended up actually doing a record with a major artist. And we're also on some live albums and backs of albums, and on DVDs with them and everything. So, it's just been fantastic. So I'm going to leave it with that. I mean, hopefully you guys will enjoy this show, and, it's just been a great ride for me. And I love talking about the music from the Beatles to Allman Betts Band, which we just did some shows, 20 shows over the holidays in 2023. So I'm going to sign off. Hope you enjoy this. Take it easy.